Hello everybody, and Happy New Year! Shibinero here with the first video of 2024. Now, I may have started this channel a while back, and I know I did have an old channel. I did do one of these types of videos, and I never got around to it when we started up this channel, but I felt that since we're in 2024, and I did acquire the Xbox One as well as the Xbox Series X recently to complete the current generation or last generation, 8th and 9th. I feel it was time to do a game room tour, and this one is unique because not all of the gaming stuff fits in one room. So I have it split up in more recent or current gen, or the HDMI era, and the older generation, the S composite video RF switch setup. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to give you a tour of both game rooms and, go down memory lane, pick out some favorites from each era, each console, and we'll call it a day. So hope you enjoy this. I've been meaning to do this for quite some time. Alright everybody, here we are in the retro game room for the first part of our Gaming Room Tour 2024 edition. So this is basically where I keep all of my pseudo retro stuff, if you'd like to call it that. Most people, the term retro is interchangeable. It just means older generation. In my mind, that's what it means. But when I think retro, I usually associate it with more pixelated or 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit era. Maybe even the early 2000s era of gaming. So would you consider PS4 retro? I don't think you would, because it's not that long ago that we had that. But older than that, I guess you would, because what's currently you can still buy in stores and on the marketplace, pretty much last generation, which is 8th generation, minus the hardware of course, and current, which is 9th. So without further ado, I'm going to give you a tour. We are actually in my bedroom, so this is the retro era or retro storage place for most of the early game consoles that I bought, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a history of each one. So over there is a CRTV. It is a flat screen, but it's a CRTV, and I use that mainly to play the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, and some of the 6th generation. Not all, but primarily the first 3, 4, and 5. I don't really count 2 and 1 because I didn't start collecting until the 3rd era. So the 3rd era, for me, the most prominent console that came out during that time is the NES. Now this is not a traditional NES where it has a door that opens and you insert the cartridge and then press it down. So that was what the NES that most people got. This is the remodel or NES top loading model, which came out later in the system's life cycle, somewhere around the mid 1990s. And it's hard to find now, and it goes for quite a bit of money. I acquired this one mainly because the games just work when you just stick the cartridge in at the top, and then more or less there's no bending of the connectors in the cartridge as it goes into the slot. So that's why I picked that off of eBay a few years ago. Maybe more than a decade ago I picked that. That is the Super Nintendo Junior, or it's a Model 2 of Super Nintendo. Now there's nothing wrong with the original model, because the original model was also top loaded as well, and I find that I like the sleeker design of this one. The other one, when you turn the power on, there is a power indicator light, and same with the NES, there's a power indicator light. These ones don't have any lights, but when the console's on pretty much, even though you don't have a light. So below that I have the Sega Genesis from the 4th generation. That's a Model 2 Genesis, and beside it a N64, the original black model. I never owned a Sega Genesis growing up. It was only probably pre-pandemic, maybe we're talking 2019, on the marketplace. Some seller was selling off his video game collection, and he was advertising that he was selling his Sega Genesis along with a catalog of games and stuff. So that's when I got my first experience of owning a Sega Genesis. Now, most people are familiar with the Model 1, which has the circular design on the front of it and the standard 3-button controllers. The Model 2 was the first to introduce standard 6-button controller. But we'll talk about Sega Genesis a little bit more when we go into the actual archives of games. So in the middle here, underneath that is a TV I bought with my very own, my first TV that I ever bought for myself way back in 2007. It was a floor model, and it primarily I use it for Generation 6 and onwards, so your PS2s, Dreamcasts, GameCubes, and whatnot, original Xbox. So in the middle here, we have the PS1 on top there, and that is the redesigned slimmer model, because my first PlayStation, which my parents got for me for Christmas in '97, I believe, so 2 years after the system had been out, is the long gray one. I'm not too sure if that was a DualShock version at the time, but that was my first PlayStation, and then eventually I got around to getting a smaller one, PS1, so that's what that is. Over here, you have the Dreamcast on top there. The Dreamcast, I remember buying it new around the year 2000, I would say, when I was in college. But obviously, you go through, not money woes, but you feel you don't use something and you sell it, and then after a while you have that nostalgic feeling again. So I picked that Dreamcast up off of eBay, an eBay listing. The GameCube, I think I've never ever sold the game. That's been my only GameCube that I've ever owned, and I can tell because the controller that comes with it, the platinum one, it has the scratch on it still, and I only have two GameCube controllers. One is a third-party one, and one is the one that came with it, and I still have it. So GameCube, that was a golden era for Nintendo because they pretty much, that was the first time that they were starting to move away from cartridge-based gaming and into embracing the whole CD-ROM technology. And beside it is the Xbox 360. Again, this is not my first Xbox 360 unit that I've owned, mainly because I had a used white one before, and that one unfortunately met with the red ring of death when it stopped working, and that was probably about 4 years into owning it. So I eventually, my mom bought that for me, and I had DDR at the time, so that was primarily what I was using it for. But Xbox 360 is probably, in my opinion, the greatest era of the Xbox brand in terms of game quality, and just quality games were coming out for it. And I would say most of the time I would prefer the Xbox 360 over the PS3, and it came out first, so it was out the door first for 7th generation console. And that's also a console that has the option of the HDMI. It has an HDMI port, so this TV only has one HDMI port, so that's the console I hooked up to the HDMI port. And then on the third area here we have the original Xbox. It's a Crystal Limited Edition version. I used to have, that was my first Xbox that I originally had, but for some reason the laser in it wasn't working, so when I tried to, follow a YouTube video and to try and fix the laser or the ribbon, something snapped. So I'm like, oh, I can't go further trying to repair this. So I just scrapped the old one and then bought a new one. So, and not too bad, because I think at that time most people were still in pandemic when I bought that. So we were only doing curbside pickup type stuff, so it was since then that I acquired that. So that's probably a few years old. Over there we have the Wii. It's on its side, so it's not standing up. So I've owned that since, not when it first came out, because it was selling like hotcakes. It was the hardest thing to get at the time because of around the time of the year it came out, which is November, which is like pre-Christmas, pre-Black Friday era. And I remember that was sold out everywhere. And it was only when C and I were at Toys R Us that I found them in stock. So that's where I got my Wii, and that's the same Wii I've had ever since. It's the first one. Down there below it is the box for the Switch Lite. I will talk a little bit more about that going out. And then on top of that, near the TV, is the PS2, the slim model version with a ton of memory cards. But I originally, if I remember correctly, nobody could get a PlayStation 2 when it came out in October of 2000. So obviously wait a little bit, and then a game that was worthy for me, at least in my eyes, coming out was Final Fantasy X, which came out in December of 2001. And it was at that time that I think this is the first time ever that I bought a game without having the console to play it on before I bought the console. So it was the fatter version at the time, because I think around that time they were going through the remodeling phase to make the slim version, and it sucked because I paid full price for the PS2 and that was around the $500 range at that time. So, but then eventually I got the slim model. It's not the same one, but I gave actually the old model to Johnny D. Darnan, and that was one of his first Gen 6 consoles. And slightly after that, when we moved out here, the old slim version croaked, like it wouldn't read the discs anymore. So I had to unfortunately scrap it, and then I bought another one. So this is that second one. And it's worked well for me ever since then, so no problems there. Like if any of these crap out, like if the PS2 craps out or if the PS1 craps out, they're not hard to find if you're looking for just the base hardware with the hookups and stuff like that. Some people might go a little bit more expensive, like, if it has more of the things that came when it was sold out. Like, your basic hookups are all you really need, but if you want, like, the cardboard inserts or anything like that inside it, and it has a box and it's in like decent condition, then it's gonna go for a little bit more. But a lot of these retro stores at least have tons of these consoles for sale, and that includes like more recent stuff too, like PlayStation 3 or Xbox One, or the namesake last gen. They may have the box, but for the most part, most of these you can find in most retro mom and pop shops. So now let's go to the library of games. So this is like my retro game shelf. So these first two rows here, where I have like some anime stuff and but they're mostly gaming themed. So this is my NES collection, and you'll notice that they are all have the boxes. Now, not every single one of them is the original box, because obviously boxes and manuals are hard to find, and they are all complete. Like, they all have the boxes, the manuals, the cheap styrofoam block, you name it. So some of them are originals, like the original box, if you want to take a look here. So like, for example, Adventure Island 1 and 3. I don't have 2, and that's one thing I'm looking for. But Batman is original, Blades of Steel is original, Bugs Bunny. The Castlevania stuff, those are all repo boxes. The cartridges are legit, are real. Final Fantasy 1, that's a homebrew I have beside it of Final Fantasy 7. Zelda's original. Most of the Mega Man stuff is original. I wouldn't say 5 and 6 are original, but the games themselves are what matter. So if I list this stuff on my the Game Eye app and stuff like that, most of the stuff I list, I'll only list the legitimate things. So like, if I was unfortunately forced to sell it or anything like that, I would only put that I own the certain legit copies. Like, look at Ninja Gaiden here. You'll see that that looks pretty real because, you know, it's been through its paces and wears and tears. But some of the more smoother looking ones, those are reproduction ones. And I really don't care because, you know, it's all about it being complete. It doesn't have to be the original thing. But yeah, so my NES collection is more or less complete. And key games for me growing up for the NES era, all the Mega Mans for sure. Obviously the Mario stuff. Mario 3. Excuse me. Ninja Gaiden was a big favorite of mine too. Hard as hell, but it eventually you can find a way to beat the game. If you ever heard me say before that retro gaming is all about patterns, especially when fighting bosses, yeah, you'll know what I mean. So, but key games for me, again, the Zeldas obviously too. Mario, Zelda, Ninja Gaiden, Mega Man, Final Fantasy, for sure, and the Turtles games as well. Now, some of these I do have the original boxes, but they look like total shit, so I just decided to print repo, buy repo copies, like, to make them look nicer. Beside there, where you see Aladdin, those are the Sega Genesis games that I bought off that seller. So not all of them came with the clamshell boxes, because that's how the games were released for the Sega Genesis back in the day before they went to the cardboard box style of them. So I do have one that doesn't have a box, and that's right there. If you can even see that. That is Rocket Knight Adventures, which is a pretty fun game. But you know, your standards. I have most of the big popular Genesis games, namely like Aladdin was popular, Sonic the Hedgehog. I have those there. Those are, most of the cases though are repo. X-Men in the corner there. World Series Baseball. Streets of Rage is probably one of my favorites for the Sega Genesis. If I was to recommend, like, what's essential Sega Genesis game if you're starting a Sega Genesis collection, definitely I would recommend any of the Sonic games, the Streets of Rage franchise, even Echo the Dolphin I would recommend, even though I'm not that good at it, but the visuals on it are amazing. Obviously Sega was king for sports games back in the day, so the NHLs or the MLBs, you name it. But more of the popular stuff that was multi-platform, like let's say Mortal Kombat, I would prefer the Super Nintendo version of that over the Genesis version, even though the Genesis has the blood code in it. But going after that, like, Super Nintendo is vastly superior in my mind. Okay, now SNES era we got here. Starting out with Animaniacs, Super Castlevania 4 in the corner there. Donkey Kong Country, the Final Fantasies, and obviously those unboxed ones. Some of those are homebrews. So I have Final Fantasy 4, 5, and 6 as 4, 5, and 6. So I know that 2 and 3 were released as, were really 4 and 6, retrospectively, if you're talking about chronological order. But 5 never came here, so I have a bootleg / homebrew copy of 5 as well as 4 and 6. And Ken Griffey. Legend of Zelda, Link to the Past, Super Mario Kart, the original one, Super Mario World, Super Metroid, Mega Man, all those good games. Mortal Kombat 2, 3, 1, Ultimate. Some Famicom games too. Some of them homebrews. But the Sailor Moon stuff was great. Star Fox was great. Turtles in Time. TMNT Tournament Fighters, World Heroes. But recommendations for... sorry, I'm having a brain fart. 4th generation for Super Nintendo. Definitely Mega Man X. Definitely Castlevania 4. Or Super Castlevania 4 as it's called. Super Mario Kart for sure. Some of Star Fox, Street Fighter for sure, Turtles in Time, Chrono Trigger if you can get it at a decent price. I did not actually, but I have it. But yeah, that's what I would recommend for 4th generation for Super. at the tail end of the bottom shelf is the start of the PlayStation or 32-bit era. I got my PlayStation. Yeah, I said that before. I got my PlayStation from my parents as a Christmas gift. But recommendations for PlayStation titles, like original, that you can only get. Well, the Final Fantasies is a no-brainer because that's where my love of Final Fantasy started with FF7, FF8, FF9. But I pretty much recommend 7. Tactics is also good, and some of the re-releases. Chrono Cross, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Now, if we go over to the side here, that's the rest of the PS1 era. So Xenogears, Parasite Eve is another one I would recommend. It's like Final Fantasy meets Resident Evil. Resident Evil also started on the PlayStation era. I do not have Resident Evil. I have it digitally on PS3. And the Mega Man games as well. And a couple more obscure ones. And then also within the 5th generation, the N64. My first N64 that I owned was a green one, a jungle green one, and it was complete, but, obviously you sell off everything because you think you don't play it anymore, and then you get nostalgic again, so then you rebuy what I did. But I don't have very many N64 games, mostly because growing up I didn't really play the system all that much, except for like the first party stuff, so like Zelda and Mario. And I know Mario Kart 64 is awesome, and I don't have it, but I will eventually get around to it. Now, starting there is a little bit of Dreamcast, and I have Capcom vs. SNK, Soul Calibur, and MK Gold. All fighting games. Now, I've been meaning to actually broaden the collection a little bit, see if I can find some of the other stuff like Sonic Adventure, Crazy Taxi, you name it, because those were some of the best games on that last system that Sega put out before they decided to stop making hardware. And then start of the 6th gen. Well, Dreamcast was released in 1999, so that is the start of the 6th generation, even though PlayStation 2 dominated the marketplace since 2000, and pretty much PlayStation has been up at the forefront for the most part. Now, I know you've been probably scratching your head wondering, why do you have so much PlayStation if you don't seem to like them? That's because I don't like the way their business practices work, so lately I've been looking into getting Xbox versions of those same games that I have on PlayStation, and then if a new game comes out and it comes out for everything, I'd rather get it on the Xbox than the PlayStation. Just because I think PlayStation are a bunch of whiners and whiny bitches, you know what I'm saying? But PlayStation 2 is probably a very good era for the Sony brand, but if I would recommend PlayStation 2 for anything, it would be for the RPGs. So like the Dot Hacks up there, the Final Fantasy X, obviously. 12 I can't really recommend because I haven't played so much of it. But Xenosaga, definitely, which is hard to come by and really expensive if you find it. Original Xbox. I bought my original Xbox mainly for DOA 3. And that was the first time I ever played a DOA game. Ninja Gaiden is also really awesome, and that's the original one of the reboot that I have there. Spider-Man is pretty good too, and TMNT. So, also in that era, the GameCube, 6th gen. GameCube games I would recommend, Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, if you can find it at a decent price. Luigi's Mansion is also very good. Twilight Princess. Oh, and the GameCube version of Soul Calibur 2. By far the best one out of the 3. PlayStation's the shittiest one, in my mind, in terms of exclusive characters, and Xbox would be second, and then the GameCube one would be my top. Beautiful Joe is also an excellent game. And then 7th gen, I don't have much for how much I talk about how much I like Xbox, but I'm going to these retro shows. Hopefully I'll pick up some more titles, but a definitive title for me for the 360 is Eternal Sonata which is right there beside Naruto and Dead or Alive. And specifically the Xbox 360 version, because that was where the game started. Again, PlayStation whined and bitched, and then they got a copy for themselves. Which, sadly, it features extra content, but it does not have trophy support, and the 360 version does. It has an achievement list, so... Plus the visuals just look better on the 360. The only real selling point, if you will, of the PS3 version is those 2 extra characters and the extra costumes. But the story is exactly the same. Wii era, definitely a good chunk of stuff. So, New Super Mario Brothers, recommend. Last Story is a unique RPG. Fire Emblem, Kirby Collection, Metroid Prime Trilogy, excellent, excellent batch of games, and the original Xenoblade Chronicles before it got released on everything else, like the 3DS as well as the Switch. Got a port for the Switch. So those are all the console things, and then beside them I have some of the portable stuff. So your Game Boy, like the original Game Boy I'm talking about. Golf is a no-brainer, just something to play. Alleyway was a staple for me back in the day. Super Mario Land. The Mega Man games, which actually the most expensive game I own is Mega Man 5. Where is it? Right beside Metroid 2. And that's complete. That is the original box. The box is worth more than the cartridge, believe it or not. The Turtles and Game Boy games. Game Boy Color, I only have 2, the Mega Man, and then Game Boy Advance, which is basically, to me, like a mini Super Nintendo. Because a lot of classic Super Nintendo games that were like classics on the original system were re-released for the Game Boy Advance. And I thought that was cool. So like Donkey Kong Country, for example, you can get all 3 of them on the Game Boy Advance. I don't have any of the Final Fantasies, but I will soon change that. Hopefully within the next few gaming shows we go to. DS, I don't have that many. But again, I'd like to kind of change that. My only probably my most expensive one is Pokemon White 2. But I recommend Ninja Gaiden Dragon Sword, the Mega Man ZX series. And of course, it's buried behind Leo, but I have the... Where is it? Oh, there. So I have the DS version of Chrono Trigger as well as the Final Fantasy 3 and 4 remake and Full Metal Alchemist. All great games. Definitely recommend all of those, especially the remake of 3 and the remake of 4. PSP over here. Not very many. Like Crisis Core, The City of Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy 1 and 2, and Mega Man and stuff like that. But yeah, like I'm trying to expand upon that. And the 3DS behind. Sorry everybody, I ran out of memory on the memory card. That's something I gotta fix. But where was I? Oh yeah, so end of portable era, we got some gaming PSP and some 3DS. Now, that's pretty much it. And what I have here, actually below that, are the strategy guides for some of those games, namely within this era. So like everything from the NES era to Xbox 360. So about 3 to Generation 7. I keep all the strategy guides in here for at least that era. Okay. And then, lo and behold, those are some of them are the original manuals, and that in the corner, those are original NES boxes. So, I have the beat up original box, but the repo looks nicer on the shelf. So, that's it for this gaming room tour, at least the first part of it. Now we're going to go on to the more modern era. Be back shortly. And hello everybody, and we're on our way to gaming room number 2, which is the crawl space. This is where I film a lot of the videos too, so over there on that table is where I do all the unboxings. And then if I do film booty videos, I film them here in that chair. This is, of course, my gaming PC, or gaming laptop, if you will, Jasmine. But here, we're starting with the current gen of where the systems are. So, PS5 over there, the Xbox Series X, and the Nintendo Switch. Now, below that are some of the limited run games boxes. So, you got, and strictly limited as well. So, you got all the Cotton stuff over there, as well as Akiba Strip, and then some of the other limited editions that I bought off of limited run games. So that was the only place to store them. I'm still working out a permanent place for them so that I can free up that space for other things. But this is currently Gen 9, minus the Switch, of course, because it was released in during the middle of Gen 8 when PS4 and Xbox One were still around. So in my mind, the Switch, even though there are still games being made for it, it's not really a 9th gen console. It was really only these two here, the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, that are, I consider, the 9th gen. And then, lo and behold, down here, we have the PS4 Pro as well as the Xbox One X. So that's 8th gen stuff. And if you're thinking about an 8th gen Nintendo console, despite it being a flop, I still have one, and there is a Wii U right there with the tablet. And then below that, you have the PS3, and that is the original fat model I've always had. I've had it since 2008. It hasn't crapped out yet, and it was originally an 80 gig model, but I expanded the hard drive to 500 gig. Before we started getting the slimmer models, which actually became 500 gig. So you could do it yourself, and I didn't do anything illegal. I just went and bought the kit from GameStop of all places, and then installed it myself. So, and below that, we have your mini retro console. So you have the Sega Genesis Mini there, which is excellent, by the way. The Super Nintendo Mini, and then the Nintendo Mini. I used to have the PlayStation 1, but it was shit and not worth the money I paid for it, so I sold it, even though I hacked it, and it was a lot more complicated to add games to it than the cartridge-based stuff, because with CD-ROM games, they have more files, and they have to be like exactly right for it to work. But it was really slow booting up too, compared to the speed of to hack it basically, and then put all the extra games on it. It's just a pain in the ass. So this is, of course, some of the anime collection, as well as the figure shrines and whatnot. But over here, you have a arcade one-up of TMNT, which includes the original arcade game as well as Turtles in Time. This is my gaming chair, which I very rarely use anymore, but my cat likes to sleep on it. Juby likes to sleep on it, so she sleeps there when she's here. And then some more of the anime collection, and some of the stuff I might have shown you in unboxing videos when I was placing figures. But this last one here is primarily where I keep current gen gaming stuff. So, and as you can see, it's probably gonna get near full, but the majority of it is Nintendo Switch, which I have a lot. And I haven't played every single one, and some I haven't even played at all. But I've been meaning to, like, you know, try and get back into that. When we go back over to the retro thing, I'll show you something. But here's PS3 era. So I don't have very much PS3. Only select certain ones, like the Ninja Gaidens, obviously. Some imports, like the Steins Gate, Ratchet and Clank Collection. Like those kinds of games, like the ones that came in collections, like Jak and Daxter. And the Ratchet and Clank, I really like those. I'm looking for specifically the Sly Cooper collection. I know there is one. That's probably going to be something I'm looking for at the next retro or gaming show we do, or attend, I should say. But I really like Borderlands too. Like, those were some of the great games on the system, as well as the 360 as well. But everything here is HDMI based. Like all the systems I mentioned, they're all hooked up via HDMI in some form. So included there, the Nintendo Wii U. I don't have a very big library for it, but game I would recommend, definitely the Wind Waker HD by far, and the first Splatoon as well. And then here is the start of Gen 8, so PlayStation 4, Xbox One, the Switch era. So definitely I recommend the Senran Kagura games as well as the Turtles games, and Spider-Man is excellent as well. I have Street Fighter. The library is not as big as it used to be, but I'm trying to weed through my wish list, collection, whatnot, and only get the games were like kind of exclusive that were really good for this system. So stuff like Horizon, maybe God of War as well. And Xbox One is probably where I would primarily play most of the third-party stuff that shows up on every system. The Xbox One version, because I have the Xbox One X, enhances it and makes it look way better than the other ones. So I've been playing a lot of Xbox One lately. Specifically like Turtles, Shredder's Revenge with Shay, like online and all the boys and whatnot. And then the Switch collection, oh my lordy, look how much Switch there is. And there's so many great games for it, but what I would recommend to you if you're looking to collect for the Switch, specifically like first party stuff, all the Marios are no-brainers, Zelda, like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, stuff like that. Metroid Dread for sure, which I have the limited edition version of. That's what that break in color is there. That steelbook there, that's Metroid Dread. And you have like those, like this is where limited run can like bleed you dry specifically, because they have such that like their business practices suck, but you really cave in because you really want it kind of thing. So something like the Shantae games or anything like that, that are normally digital games, but limited run gets the license to release physical editions of that. That's where I would recommend like going to these shows to find some of these, or even the stores that actually sell them, because then you don't have to wait. One such game that I have the digital version of for all platforms, or almost all platforms, is Anno Mutationum. And there was a physical release for the Switch and the PS4, as well as the PS5. There is no Xbox version of it, sadly, at least physically. But I would recommend that game digitally on those systems. It's kind of like a cyberpunk-esque game. It's really cool. And then down in the corner here is your current 9th gen stuff. So I've been looking at Game Pass lately, so that's why I don't have a lot of physical stuff for the system, but MLB The Show 21, which I got on sale, as I said, as well as Stray. And then for PS5, specifically stuff that not necessarily is only on PS5, but looks good on PS5, so like Stranger Paradise, which I could get on Xbox as well, Crisis Core, and then of course the Final Fantasy VII Remake and FF16, as well as Valkyrie Elysium. And that's just some 4Ks. But this has been the Gaming Room Tour. So to conclude this video, I am going to show you what I am currently playing, or at least plan to, because today is January 1st. And I hope to, that's a lot of games that I just showed you. And obviously I haven't completed all of them or played all of them. So what I'm trying to do is divide stuff up. So back in the retro room here. So there's Miku. But if you look here on this whiteboard, I list every generation and for systems I have. I don't have the Master System, but I have hacked the NES Classic to put the Master System on there, and I can actually get ROMs from other regions. So today is Monday, so we'll be playing those two, so Ninja Gaiden and Star Tropics for the NES. And I have played Star Tropics, but I've never beaten it. So tomorrow is 4th gen, Wednesday is 5th gen, Thursday is 6th gen, And then Friday is 7th, Saturday is 8th, and 9th. And then, of course, the wild card is Steam PC. So, that's it for the game room tour for 2024. I don't think I will add very many new hardware pieces, at least as of late. If anything, if I wanted to add something that I don't have, it would probably be one of the older systems, namely the Sega Master System is one that I'm thinking about investing in. I don't have a Sega Saturn, and I know that it's very rare that I see videos talking about that console, as well as the 32X, which is a 32-bit add-on for the Genesis, as well as Sega CD. So they're mostly Sega things that I'm looking at because I only own the Genesis and the Dreamcast. And I'd like to go back into Sega's past a little bit because that was kind of like when you were a kid, you had one or the other. Growing up, you either had Nintendo or you had Sega. And in my mind, I never really, as a kid, you don't really appreciate, because you only see one side of things. So those kids who got Sega and liked Sega, I had a friend who had Sega growing up. I liked playing over at their house, like with them, the Sega games, even though I'm so used to the NES stuff, which sold a lot better than the Sega. Same with almost every era where there was a Sega console and a Nintendo console competing, the Nintendo usually won that battle. And Sega like to poke fun at Nintendo because Sega do what Nintendo don't. If you've ever heard that before. But yeah, I'd like to probably look into investing into a Sega Master System as well as the Saturn and some of the 32-bit extras that came out during the 5th generation. Because everything else, like Nintendo, Xbox and PlayStation, I literally have almost everything. The only PlayStation thing I don't have is the Vita, which I am looking into right now, as well as for I'm not really into the PlayStation VR so much, but I might be looking into getting older handhelds, namely the original Game Boy as well as the Game Boy Color I don't have, but you know, I can play all that stuff on the GBA SP, which I do have, and the DS can play the Game Boy Advance games. So I'm definitely looking into finding those. It'll be harder because I'm not looking for like the original one, like the Game Boy. I'm not looking for the original gray one. I'm looking for one of the colored models that happen, like the different color. The green one specifically. But yeah, so that's what I'm looking forward to hopefully adding to the collection in the next few years maybe. It won't happen all at once, obviously, because, you know, you got other priorities than your hobbies and stuff. But this has been the Gaming Room Tour for 2024. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like more videos like this, like maybe to delve into the collection a little bit more, I'm definitely considering that, like top 10 NES games or top 10 Genesis games, that kind of thing. But I will tell you this, I am working on or brainstorming an idea for my top 10 gaming series, which will feature gameplay footage. So I am looking into that, into making that, and that's probably my next project that I'm going to work on. So be on the lookout for that. But anyway, everybody, thanks for watching the video. Stay beautifully and perfect out there. Take care of yourselves and each other. Be kind to yourselves and each other. And remember, y'all keep up the awesomeness. And we'll see you later. And we're going to end Plushie Miku.